Connection, opportunity, possibility. It's what we all want. Spectrum has built a world where anything is possible, with products and services designed to work better together for a seamless connectivity experience. A connection to family and friends, a connection to education, and a connection to new opportunities. So there's no limit to how big we can dream. That's Life Unlimited. That's Spectrum.
Welcome to Mind Love, episode 61. Today's episode is all about the 7 secrets to healthy, happy relationships.
Practice letting go throughout your relationship. We want to get away from this thought of you're either in a relationship or you're ending a relationship. Because the truth is, in all relationships, all the time, there's letting go. There's a letting go of who you think you're supposed to be. There's different phases. So if you're retiring, maybe there's a letting go of the amount of income you had. To practice letting go as a part of the relationship gets you familiar that rhythm, that's always going to be part of the relationship.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
Please stop what you're doing and hit the subscribe button. More subscribers means even better guests and even more value. Plus, it helps grow the show, so more people can find it. And if you ask me, everyone can use a little more mind love. And if you need another reason, I would really appreciate it. Hi, friends. Last week, we talked about how relationships teach you about yourself with spiritual teacher Guy Finley. And wow, I got so many outpouring messages. That episode 60, was definitely one of Mind Love's most loved episodes. So if you haven't heard it, check it out. And as promised, we are doing a 2-week segment on relationships. So why 2 weeks? Well, relationships are complicated, obviously. If you've ever been in one, you know that firsthand. It's just hard enough to deal with our own shit sometimes, and then we intermingle our lives so deeply with another human. And we have zero training and wonder why the divorce rate is so high. Somehow the school system's like, oh yeah, you definitely need chemistry, but let's let you figure out relationships, communication, proper budgeting on your own. That sounds promising. So last week we explored this topic with the very wise Guy Finley. And now we're going to get some perspective on the feminine side. And I'm very excited about this one because today we're speaking to someone who has been on my guest bucket list. I read one of her books years ago and it just spoke to me. So at that time, I realized I was reading a lot of success books, but they were all from that masculine point of view, the do side. And I realized that her book was the first book I read around that time with a more feminine focus. Plus, it was kind of one of those surreal moments. Right after I got off the interview, I told my neighbor, who I had just interviewed with, and she was like, no way, I love her, I have all of her books. So it was just one of those moments that shifted my perspective from the grind to the gratitude. I've never said that before, but I think it's going to become a thing. So today we're talking to HeatherAsh Amara. HeatherAsh is the author of the best-selling Warrior Goddess Training. That is the book that I read, and I highly recommend it. I'll link to it in the show notes. She also wrote The Warrior Goddess Way and the Toltec Path of Transformation. So a lot of her teachings definitely have that Toltec flair. Another cool fact about HeatherAsh is that she studied extensively under Don Miguel Ruiz. I've mentioned him before. His trilogy, The 4 Agreements, The Mastery of Love, and The Voice of Knowledge were very transformative for me in my early 20s. So she is fortunately really close with the Ruiz family, and her latest book, On Relationships, was written with Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. So you guys are in for a treat. And as a reminder, all of the books that I just mentioned, which I know there were a few of them, will be at mindlove.com/060. Today, 3 key things we will learn are how to become aware of our agreements, beliefs, and fears inside of a relationship, a better way to communicate with your partner, or really anyone else for that matter, and how to make room for a relationship to evolve. And last, I want to give a quick apology. There's a couple glitches in the audio today. Why can't technology be perfect? But I edited it to where it shouldn't be too big of a factor. So thanks for understanding, guys. Before we get started, I want to tell you about the best way to stay in your highest frequency between episodes. Thousands of listeners are loving my daily morning Mind Love emails. They're short daily reminders of your own beauty, magic, and power so you can start each day with your best mindset. Just go to mindlove.com and sign up right there on the homepage. Or if you're out and about, just text the word morning to 33777. That's morning to 33777. Plus, you'll get some amazing free gifts when you do. First, you'll get a really cool free booklet of Power Lists based on proven methods from the most successful people in the world to automate your highest decisions. Plus, you'll get a free guided affirmation meditation. It's set with a binaural frequency known as the miracle tone, which is known to make you a magnet for love, health, and abundance. Then it's layered with affirmations to perfectly tune your frequency for transformation. Just go to mindlove.com to sign up. Or if you're out and about, just text the word morning to 444999. That's morning to 444999. And now let's welcome HeatherAsh Amara to the show.
Thanks so much, Melissa. So happy to be here.
I'm really excited for this interview because much of my healing came from the knowledge I found in books, and yours was one of them. Your book, Warrior Goddess Training, was actually the first female-focused self-development book I read. And until then, I didn't really realize how much I was living in my masculine energy. So thank you so much for writing that and putting that out there.
You're so welcome. So valuable.
So for those listeners who might not be familiar with you and who don't feel like they're listening to a famous person right now, give us a little bit about your background.
Sure. My big picture view, I was born in Southeast Asia, traveled all over the world when I was a kid. And when I came to the States, I felt really disconnected and just confused. And so I started studying politics, realized that wasn't what I was looking for. And then I started studying different spiritual traditions and came across a bunch of teachers, read a lot of books, like you said. And my main teacher was Don Miguel Ruiz, who's the author of the Four Agreements. And it was worth working with him that I really discovered the amount of agreements that I had, the belief system, and how to start to change that to create more freedom. So my book, Warrior Goddess Training, came out about 4 years ago now. And it was one of those books that just took off immediately because women need to have warrior energy, which is about commitment, 100%, yes, I'm in, as well as goddess energy, which is about opening, creativity, and fluidity. So that's my mini story.
Well, I'm so glad I have you here because not only did you have a pretty profound impact on my life, but also your newest book is co-authored by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. And his father, Don Miguel Ruiz, wrote The Mastery of Love, which was the first book that really just opened me up in a way that I hadn't been open before. So this feels very serendipitous. So you actually studied under Don Miguel Ruiz Papa. Am I right?
Yes, for many years. And I now teach with the family. So I travel some and teach with the family. So I'm very close with them. So it's been, great gift to get to write the relationship book with Don Miguel Jr. We had a lot of fun working on it together.
How did you two decide to explore the topic of relationship in your book together?
It's a funny story, actually. I work with Sounds True, which is a great audio company. And I just had this idea. I wanted to do something with Don Miguel because we're really good friends and we teach together a lot. And so I called Sounds True and was like, hey, I want to do this program with Miguel. And I gave him some ideas. And they're like, what we really need is a relationship book. So I called Miguel. I was like, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So it was really a gift because he is happily married, has 2 kids. He's been married for 11 years now. I'm divorced. I was dating at the time that I started working on this book. And so we had a big breadth of experience to work with. So I think that makes it a really strong book because it's both from the masculine point of view and the feminine point of view, and also from diverse experiences and lifestyles.
What would you say is the biggest mistake that people make when we enter into a relationship?
I think one of them is that we want the other person to be everything. We have this idea that they should fulfill all of our needs and that if we just make the commitment that everything will work out. But the truth is all relationships are a work in progress. They take a tremendous amount of communication. And a lot of times we get attached with how we think the relationship should look. And we don't balance out the 2 first I think, primary pieces of a relationship is clarity around what your commitment is to yourself as well as to the relationship. And the second is freedom, that we're giving ourselves and our partner the freedom to be who we really are instead of trying to change each other.
I noticed that in most of your trainings, commitment is the first step. And the first secret you have for the 7 secrets to a healthy relationship is commitment. And I see how commitment is an obvious first step in a relationship, but why is commitment such a big step in everything that we do?
Such a great question. When we commit to ourselves, what that means is we're in the present moment and we're really listening to where we want to put our energy. And I think a lot of us don't think about commitment too much, especially as women. We're often committing to everybody else and what we think other people want us to be. And so I found it very beneficial for all of us to say, okay, my primary commitment in life is to learn about myself, is to show up and be present so that I'm full, so that I can then be healthy in relationship, so I can really share the best of myself. And sometimes people get afraid, like, oh, I'm going to be selfish if I'm always putting myself first. But it's not about that at all. It's about really listening and balancing your needs with your needs in the relationship. And both need to be brought on the table, not just one or the other. So that's powerful.
You're so right. I think many of us, especially women, are just used to putting everyone else before themselves. Although I'm pretty sure my husband puts me before himself, even more than I put him before me. So it's not always just women. But okay, so I'm working on a keynote right now. So I've been challenged to dig into the whole of my story. I'm used to telling bits at a time, especially on Mind Love, but the whole thing has been a lot. Well, I was just running it by a friend and she said, what I'm hearing you say is that you never put yourself first. And I thought, oh, I never even thought of it that way. So I think it's just hard to see our own patterns sometimes, especially if we're still in it. So what is a way to make sure that this commitment becomes intrinsic and it actually means something to us beyond just saying, okay, I'm committing to myself for now?
For me, that's about really stepping back and looking at the places where we're trying to be perfect. Because what many of us do is we create this image that I think it's like it stands next to us, and it's this image of who we think we're supposed to be. And we spend most of our time comparing ourselves to this image of perfection, beating ourselves up, falling short, and not feeling good about ourselves. And what that means is we're not even present. We're actually not even in our own bodies. We're not in our own experience. One of my favorite ways to do this is super simple, but it's life-changing. Bring one hand to your heart and one hand to your belly, and just take a breath. And to start by committing to no longer abandon yourself, to be aware and to start to stop the patterns of comparing yourself and self-criticism. So the commitment is to show up with yourself and get to know, who am I now? Not who do I think I'm supposed to be? Who does the other person want me to be? Who am I now? And it's one of those things that it sounds really simple, but it takes a lot of practice to come into the present moment with ourselves. And I see this type of a commitment is a form of stepping into intimacy with ourselves, that we're committing to get to know who we are, what our needs are, what we want, what our strengths are, and what our weaknesses are as well.
Yeah, really learning to love ourselves anyway, even through the flaws, which is so funny because we all have flaws and somehow we think we're less worthy because we haven't lived up to that other flawed person standing next to us. So I love what you said about that idea of perfection. So the second secret is freedom in relationship. And I know that the idea of freedom can be really difficult because when we think about commitment or relationship, freedom isn't really one of those words that immediately comes to the forefront. So what does it mean to give your partner the freedom that they need?
It means that you are willing to see your partner for who they are and accept them. It's about really learning to be unconditional. Now, this doesn't mean you have to love everything your partner does, because you're not going to. but that you're willing to recognize each of you are different beings. You have different needs, different desires, different likes, and that you don't have to do everything together, and that you don't always have to agree with each other, and that you're giving each other the freedom to grow and change. You think this is something that stifles relationships. We're afraid that this is the only love that we're going to have, or that they're going to leave us. And so what we do is we create these huge attachments of, I'll try and be who I want to be, who I think you're supposed to be. And we chain each other to the past, basically. And while it can be scary, it's also completely liberating. Because then you wake up with your partner excited, like, who are you today? And you're evolving together. You're committed to seeing who your partner is in a loving way, and you're committed to being with yourself in a loving way, so that you're both free to be yourself.
For me, in my first relationships, there wasn't really a lot of trust. I mean, we were kids starting out in high school, so I can't really blame my first boyfriend for going away to college and wanting to become the only male cheerleader at his school and hook up with a bunch of college girls who could do the splits. But then I had to heal from that, and that pain leaked into my relationships, even with trustworthy people that I dated. Plus, I think a part of me was addicted to that drama cycle of being hurt and then being showered with attention and begging for forgiveness. So I don't know, we won't really dig into that, but I know a lot of times it can be easier to give yourself or your partner freedom when you have clear boundaries set. But I found a lot of people aren't even clear on the boundaries they need to feel secure in a relationship. So how do you, first of all, really get clear on your own boundaries and then state them to your partner in a way that's well received?
Yeah, great question. And that goes back to your commitment to yourself, that you're willing to listen to what your needs are and adjust as you go along. So I'll talk in two different ways. So there's people that are just getting into relationships or want to get into a relationship. And then there's people that have been in relationship for a long time and maybe need to adjust. So if you're new to a relationship, or you're just starting one, or you're wanting to get into a relationship, to get clear with yourself, what do you need to feel secure and safe? What do you need to feel that you can really show up? What are your needs? To find out what that is outside of the relationship, really basic questions. How do I want to be in a relationship? Like, what does a relationship mean to me? Does that mean we're both committed to being monogamous? Does that mean that we can date other people? What does that look like? And so that's really clearly defined. And a great way to have a conversation like this is to say to your partner, I'm really excited about where we're going, and I also want to be really clear about what the container is and what each of us need. You know, I had a friend that just was with a new partner and said to this person, I really need two things from you. I need you to take care of your own finances, because she was trying to support this person and just realizing this is not working. And I need you to not coach me. She listened to how she was feeling in the relationship. And really, in order to state what your preferences, you have willing to listen to yourself and feel, where are you going out of integrity? Or where do you feel like it's not working for you? Sometimes it's scary to state what your needs are. But if you don't state what your needs are, this is what I always look at. If you don't state what your needs are and you just let it go, the relationship's not going to last. Or there's going to be a crisis at some point that you're going to have to address. And for those of you that are already in a relationship, that maybe you're wanting to adjust some things, you can sit down with your partner and say, I've been really thinking about this, and I'm looking for how we can take our relationship to the next level. And I would want to clarify what we're both stepping into, what we're committing to, what the container is for our relationship. There's a difference between saying, I want to have, let's say, a monogamous relationship, and your partner's saying, that's not what I want. And we're like, you have to change in order for me to feel safe. When you're honoring yourself, you can say, well, that doesn't work for me, period. You don't try and force or change them. You just say, that doesn't work for me. So we need to either modify this or we need to end the relationship. And so you're not contorting yourself to fit, but you're not also saying they're wrong or bad. It's just your needs are not compatible, period.
That is so funny that you just brought that up, because I have a friend going through that exact same thing right now. She has always been curious about polyamorous relationships, but now she's in a situation where if she's not ready, she'll probably lose the relationship. So she's deciding if now's the time. But ever since, I feel like everywhere I turn, the idea of open relationship has been just right in front of me. And I'm curious about it because I have heard that it breaks a lot of paradigms of the ego and also of the standards just set by society. But I can feel this natural resistance to it. So it's just kind of interesting to watch how both of us react to the situation. That's not even my actual situation.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch people navigate. And it's so much about clear communication and honoring. We just have to stay clear with ourselves. If you're trying something new, let's say, with a partner, so maybe you're in a long distance relationship and maybe the agreement is we're going to see each other every 2 weeks and one of us will fly to the other. I mean, that's an important thing. That sort of a commitment is important too. Like, how often do we see each other? Where do we see each other? Even if you live close together, how much time do we spend together? What works for you? How much alone time do you need? Just asking good questions is so powerful. And if you're wanting to explore something new, which, maybe you say, well, let's try seeing each other once a week and see how that works. Then what's really helpful is to say, let's try it for 3 months. And then at the end of 3 months, we can revisit.
I like the idea of setting a time to revisit any situation, because then it doesn't feel like you're trapping yourself in this commitment prison. And instead of having to be the one to bring back up a conversation, you both are already expecting that conversation is going to take place at a given time.
Yes. And you don't know. You don't know till you explore and try it. So to have that deadline really helps you stay honest about paying attention to, is this working for me or not?
And these first 3 secrets are called the foundational secrets. So they're really to build a solid foundation in your relationship. And this 3rd secret is awareness. So where does awareness come into play in a relationship?
Paying attention and becoming really aware of what's going on in their mind, what's going on in the emotional body, what's going on in the physical body, and being clear with ourselves, being honest with ourselves. So any relationship, it's very easy to go into what I think of as rote mode, where we're just doing the relationship. We don't have really any awareness of how we're feeling or what's actually going on with our partner, especially long-term relationships. We just get into a groove. And when we start to really hone our awareness, we start to pay attention to what are the stories I'm telling myself? What are the patterns that I've developed that actually aren't serving me or serving the relationship? What's happening in my emotional body? Are there emotions from my past that I'm dragging into the relationship that I need to clean up, that I need to do some work to clear out the past? What's happening with my physical body? Sometimes it's simple as the awareness that you're trying to stay up late with your partner every night, whereas you're not a night person, you're a morning person. You actually need alone time in the morning. So it can be really simple things like that, but that make huge difference in the fluidity and the flow of a relationship.
It's funny because I look back on my relationships and I know that I was a little bit different in the beginning. And if I'm being honest with myself, I was trying to impress that person. So maybe I wasn't being authentic in the beginning, but it's not like I was doing it to deceive the guy. It's just at first it's new and it's exciting. So I'm extra motivated to be this better version of myself. So yeah, I might be different on the first date versus how I am at home in sweatpants after being married for a few years. So how do you bring enough awareness in yourself to say, is this behavior sustainable or am I totally doing a bait and switch right now? Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777. You know what's crazy? After all these years of hosting Mind Love and talking to some of the world's leading experts, one of the biggest eye-openers for me has been just how much our gut affects, well, everything. When my gut feels good, my mind feels clearer, my intuition is stronger, and I just feel more balanced. And that's why I'm excited about Zoe, a science-backed nutrition company that is totally changing how we understand our gut health. They've created the most scientifically advanced at-home gut test and built the world's largest microbiome database. So when you get your results, you're not getting generic advice. You're getting insights about your body that other companies just don't have the data to provide. There's also just so much misleading health information out there. Food companies even pay influencers to promote ultra-processed foods as healthy. And that's why I love that Zoe relies purely on science. Real science. The randomized controlled trial showed that participants were 4 times as likely to report better sleep and more energy, all thanks to the info from the largest microbiome database on the planet. So go to Zoe.com and find out what Zoe membership could do for you. And because you listen to Mind Love, you can use the exclusive code MINDLOVE10 to get 10% off membership. As a Zoe member, you'll get an at-home test kit and personalized nutrition program to help you make smarter food choices that support your gut. That's Zoe.com. Use MindLove10 at checkout. Trust your gut. Trust Zoe. Is this behavior sustainable, or am I totally doing a bait and switch right now?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's so true. Early part of a relationship, there's so much hormones happening, so much like just excitement that's happening that we can override ourselves without realizing it. So, one of the things that my partner and I talked about in the early relationship, we're still in the hormone phase. We'll see what it's like when the hormones die down. And just having that awareness that it was going to shift and that we would have to navigate that as it came along. So I think that's a really helpful awareness that you've got about a year and a half is usually how long the hormones are on full force. And then they start to dissipate. And then you get to see, okay, what's here? And hopefully you've built good communication skills so that as the challenges start to arise, you can really bring them into the relationship. But one thing I always tell people is it's really helpful to, before you go into a relationship, write down for yourself, where are you in your life right now? What do you want in your life? What are you committed to for yourself? What are you wanting to expand and grow? And what are your values? And then check back in at certain points in your relationship, like check in 3 months. How am I doing in relationship to that? 6 months, a year, so that you're getting a sense of, am I staying true to myself, or am I falling into the relationship and not honoring myself? And so sometimes, I think in all relationships, there's a lot of adjustments that happen along the way.
Right. And I think that's true with everything in life. I think sometimes we make a commitment to something and then we think we have to follow through no matter what, or this is how it's going to be no matter what. I actually have a Post-it on my wall right now that says, you owe nothing to your younger self. You're no longer chasing a dream you've outgrown. And that's why that reviewing process and reflecting process is so important. Because say you have a goal, you should check in with yourself every now and then and ask, is this even still something that I want? Or is this still in line with who I am? Or has something shifted or evolved? So I think that's a good habit to get into with anything in life, whether it's goals, jobs, or relationships.
Yes, it's just something that we're not taught. The message we get is get into a relationship, live happily ever after. And then we think something's wrong with us. Something's wrong with me because I'm struggling in my relationship. But we're not taught communication skills. We're not taught that there is a lot of adjustment that's needed. And we're also not taught the whole piece around freedom, that we're both going to grow and change so that there's navigating that gets to happen throughout the relationship.
Okay, so to recap, these 3 first foundational secrets were that we have committed to ourselves and to the relationship, we set our boundaries and have given each other freedom, and then we bring awareness into our own feelings and the stories we tell ourselves and basically the baggage that we're bringing in from our past. Now, number 4 is the secret of healing. So tell us about that one.
Yeah, the fourth secret is the secret of healing. And what I've seen is that as we get into relationship and we start feeling secure, what often happens, and I'll say always happens, is that the old wounds start to arise. So the places where we've had hurt from our past, hurt from other relationships, hurt from our childhood, that the doors of those open. The reason it's coming up is because you finally feel safe, you feel loved, you feel held, it's solid. And so now the wisdom of your being is like, oh, good, now we can deal with all this old stuff that we've been carting around. So it's good. It's a good thing. And we get to heal our belief systems.
Right. I can totally see how that's a good thing. I say this all the time, but my current relationship has been so healing just because I feel so supported and secure to just be who I am. So I feel like I've healed so much about my belief systems or the old agreements I have had or the wounding from old relationships and even some of the wounding from my childhood. So then instead of pushing those things away and thinking of them as scary, we can actually welcome it together and look at it as our next challenge together as a couple. But I'm curious because, as we said earlier, in the beginning of a relationship, we have our best foot forward. We're not usually telling the other person, well, here's all my baggage, let's take it out and play with it. So how do we make sure that we don't develop a resentment for the healing that each other needs? Or how do we best hold space for our partner's healing without letting it get in the way of our own journey?
It's really about giving the other person freedom to be where they are on their healing journey, that you don't have to fix them or change them, and that will it have an impact? It might, but that you each talk to each other about it and do your best to navigate how can we do things together that bring us great joy. So let's say that one partner is going through healing sexual abuse or big trauma in their childhood, and it starts to affect different parts of the relationship. Be a really good time to sit down and say, okay, what do you need? How can I support you in your healing? And then the other person saying, what do each of us need? And then you get to navigate it, but also look at what are things we can do that we love doing together that's not going to trigger either of the other person. So you may have to find outside things to do that you both love. So maybe going for hikes or getting into something that maybe both of you have been interested in it, but never really thought about it before. So that the places where it's difficult, you know you need to do work there, but you're not trying to fix your partner. You're just giving them the space to do their work. But you're also making sure that as a couple, you have things that you're doing that nurture both of you. So you get to take a break.
I think there's 2 types of fixing too. First, trying to change your partner, which is really just a sign that you should probably find someone you love enough that you accept their flaws. And the second, and this is a huge one, even in more compatible relationships, is saying, let me make this better so that you don't have to hurt anymore. And so it sounds kind, it sounds valiant. My husband and I both do that. That seems to be pretty common in men, where women just want someone to listen to them and a shoulder to cry on. And then men hear it and they want to take action. So it's taken a while, but my husband now knows that I need space to process. Whereas he might want to talk things out right away. I'm like, give me 20 minutes first. And then I do it too. And it's something that I've just recently realized, but I think it's because I am an empath. So if he's down, I can feel it in myself. So I want to fix it so I don't have to feel it anymore, which is kind of selfish. And that dynamic has even come out in friendships. So I'm often the person that my friends come to with their problems. So sometimes they might have one, and I can just clearly see a solution. They're obviously unhappy about something in their life. They want to move on or make a change, but they just can't quite do it. So then it becomes difficult for me to be around because I think, just take action. We laid out this plan. Do it so we can both be less uncomfortable when I'm around you.
Yeah, please fix this.
It's hard.
It is. It is. And that's part of the healing too, is learning to still have your heart open, but close down the sensitivity so that you're not being impacted by your partner. So have compassion for them. But when you really, really, really get there on their journey, and that you can help by loving them, by showing up, by being present, but you're not going to be able to fix it or take the pain away. And the more one partner says, I have to fix or make the pain go away to the other partner, the messier it gets. And so really honoring, like your husband honoring, oh, she needs space. Because, especially for men, often they're just like, tell me what to do so I can do it.
Right. Plus, we think that we're fixing them. We think that we're taking this pain away. But that pain is such a huge part of someone's transformation. It's a part of their growth. So if you take that away from them, if you take away their pain, you're actually stealing their mode of transformation in a way. And to bring it one level further, I believe that our souls come here for certain experiences. So if you take that away from them, they're going to find another way to experience that growth. So what you think as fixing could actually be making things worse on multiple levels.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. What we're also saying is that I don't trust you to go through this process. I don't think you're strong enough. That's really the message we're giving them by trying to fix it. So if you can say, I have total faith in you that you'll get through this. I have a dear friend right now that's in a really difficult relationship. And I talk to her every once in a while. And now I'll just be like, that's a red flag. And I'll say, I trust you. Like, you're going to be in this relationship as long as you need to be. Can it change? Yeah, it can change. But I'm also going to tell you where I see the red flags. I trust you're committed to your healing. You'll use this to heal. And it's so hard not to go in and fix. She's learning to doing it on her pace. And I might not like it, or I might be worried about her. But the best gift I can give her is saying, I'm here for you. I have faith in you. And I'll tell you what I see if you ask, because she asks me, she's like, what do you think? I'm like, red flag. And then she'll say, why? And I'll explain it. Yeah. I'll just explain, this is what I see, but I'm not attached. You have to see it too. I'm just like, this is my opinion.
So funny. I am the red flag girl too. I feel like you're in my brain. But it is hard not to get attached to the outcome. But it's also pretty hard to know who you can actually be that open and honest with. And I have two examples of this, both friends dealing with relationship issues. So one of them would complain all the time about how she didn't love him and how low she was. So we'd get together and we'd talk about it, and she'd agree with me and we'd make this plan. But then the next day, suddenly something would flip and she would hold all of those comments against me and say I wasn't supporting her relationship. And she'd tell her boyfriend I didn't like him, and it sucked. It wasn't good for either of us. And that friendship actually ended up falling away. I mean, we were growing apart for a while anyways. But then another friend, who's still one of my very best friends, will ask me, and I'll share my red flags. And she's very open and receptive, even if she doesn't do exactly what I would do, and even if she has her own process that she's going to follow. But I think it's just very easy to have that mutual respect because we both know that it's coming from love, and all of our communication is in love. And so it helps me on one side too, to just be a friend and to know that I don't know what's best for somebody else. And none of us really know for certain anything. So we just help each other grow. But it's really about just learning how to be that mirror for someone without forcing the outcome.
Exactly. That is a big part of maturing, I believe, of really expanding, is that you understand at a deep level everybody's on a journey and you respect their journey. Even if you don't understand it, if you don't like it, if it's really messy, that's freedom. That's giving freedom to your partner or to a friend. So within a relationship, in the healing part, you're honoring and you're respecting how they're doing their healing. And you can share, but it's that place of not being attached and not thinking, I know what's best for them. The truth is, we don't know. We have no idea.
You know what I love about the start of a new year? It's kind of like opening a fresh notebook. 365 blank pages just waiting to be filled with your story. But sometimes we get stuck trying to write that story alone. Maybe there's a chapter you've been wanting to revise, or maybe you're just ready for a whole new plot twist in 2025. But here's what I've learned from my own journey with therapy. It's kind of like having an editorial partner for your life story. Someone who helps you see the patterns that you might have missed, who gives you the tools to write stronger chapters ahead. And that's why I'm so excited about BetterHelp. They've made therapy accessible and easy, serving over 5 million people worldwide. With over 30,000 credentialed therapists, each with different specialties, you can find someone who really gets your unique story. But what I love is how flexible it is. Everything is online, and you can easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost until you find the perfect fit. And it's not just for people that are dealing with major challenges. Therapy can help anyone become the best version of themselves. So write your story with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/mindlove today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. So you kind of teased secret number 5, which is joy. And obviously, if there's no joy in a relationship, that's a huge problem. But tell us about what joy means to you in a relationship.
The reason we're with somebody in a relationship, I believe, is because they bring us happiness. They help us to play more. They help us to relax. They help us to be silly. That can get lessened in a relationship when you've got bills, when you've got kids, when you've got deadlines, that you forget to play with each other. You forget to enjoy each other. And so bringing in joy, how can you create the space for each other that you bring play back in, that you bring creativity back in, and that you look at your relationship as a whole from a place of curiosity and make sure that you're setting time aside with your partner to play, to bring joy in, to have pleasure, to really enjoy each other, whatever that looks like for each of you.
That's so true. It's even with buying a new toy or a new car. It's so exciting at first, and then it just becomes part of your normal. We adapt. So you've got to find the ways to view that thing or that relationship or that new person as still this vibrant, new, exciting thing. So does that go back to pleasure and sexuality?
Absolutely.
So what do you do in those situations? I mean, it's the running joke in every sitcom TV show of the wife just not wanting to have sex anymore. So what are ways to reignite that spark or make sure that you still give time to that aspect of your relationship?
I say 2 words, sex dates. That often what happens is that life gets so busy and we're feeling so stressed that that goes out the window. And that when you set aside time and you say, okay, once a week, we're going to have a pleasure date. It doesn't even have to be a sex date. It can be a pleasure date. That you agree and that you put it on the calendar and that you not make it after you've had a really full meal and you're both exhausted. I used to do it all the time. I'm like, oh, let's have a sex date after dinner. And then we're both like so exhausted. So that you mix it up about when you could have the date, that pleasure date, and that you use that time. You want to set aside at least 2 hours of uninterrupted time. So phones are off. You know the kids aren't going to interrupt you, even if you have to go out someplace or have your parents watch the kid and anything to make the container so that it's solid. And that you use that time to connect with each other. And it may be that you massage each other or that you do one at a time. Another great idea is that you give each other pleasure one at a time. So you say, okay, this week it's my turn to give you pleasure, and then next week it's your turn to give me pleasure. And so you get to practice receiving, totally receiving, and you get to practice just totally giving. And that you're also willing to talk and explore new things and listen to what each of you need. So sex dates really, really help. And also bringing your awareness up of what agreements do you have around sexuality that might be getting in the way. So sometimes we have agreements that, once I have kids, I shouldn't want to be sexual. Or as I go through menopause, my sex drive's going to go away. And just for example, or now that I'm working hard, I don't have time for pleasure. So we have to really bust ourselves around those agreements and be willing to call them out. And a lot of times too, for women, there's giving ourselves permission to have pleasure in our lives in all areas.
Yeah, I know for me, receiving has definitely been a huge thing that I'm working on. I realized it was just difficult for me. I was always used to trying to work for love. So that was something that my husband and I have both had to work on together, was my ability to receive. And I mean, it's still something that I work on. So I love that idea of having focused time, because even when I am receiving now, I'm preparing to give.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here's another thing I'm curious about. So a lot of times one partner wants to have sex more than the other. And it's not always just the man, although I do think that's the most common. But if you are the one frustrated and you bring it up to your partner, how should you say it rather than just saying, you never want to have sex anymore? Because I feel that that is just reaffirming the negative and reinforcing that reality that he or she never wants to have sex anymore.
Yes. How you language things is so important, because you can shut someone down immediately or make them feel like they're being judged or blamed, or you can open up a door to a conversation. So a great conversation to have would be to first say, what are you missing? Are you missing touch? Are you missing closeness? Are you missing the intimacy? Are you missing just the physicality? Like, to get clear with yourself, what do you want more of in the relationship? And then to sit with your partner and be vulnerable about that and be open to say, hey, I'm realizing that I'm really missing being able to just kiss you without having anything else going on in our life. Or I'm really missing touch right now. And get specific about it and say, how can we create an environment that we can into this with each other again? What would you need? You're inviting your partner to look at it with you.
Yeah, just that simple shift in reframing the question can open up so much, because sometimes I don't think I really know what I'm missing until I'm asked, or I ask myself. And then it's like, oh, that's what it is. That's why I wasn't feeling up to this, or whatever it might be. So opening up that communication really does so much in helping each other discover more about ourselves too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Instead of going adversarial, like, I need you to give me this, or what's wrong with you, or why isn't this happening? You're saying, hey, here's something that I miss. Can we look at this as a partnership? And often in relationships, we make the mistake of getting into an adversarial role with our partners, seeing each other as enemies rather than as, hey, let's look at this together. What do each of us need? How can we be creative?
And this is actually a really great segue into secret number 5, which is communication. And I know I feel like this one has to be one of the biggest ones. So what is it? We aren't trained to communicate whatsoever at all in our lifetimes, which is so interesting. The first time I read a book on communication, I thought, wait, this makes sense, and this yields such different results. So why is this not in our high school curriculum?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I had the same exact experience of one day realizing, wait a minute, why am I beating myself for not communicating where I never learned how to? It's a skill. It's a skill that it's really helpful to study, that skill of communication. I have 2 books I always recommend to people. They're very similar, so you just pick one of them. One's called Messages by Matthew McKay, and the other one is Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And they teach us just the nuts and bolts of how to communicate effectively. Really beautiful books.
I'll link to both of those in the show notes at mindlove.com/061 for anyone interested, because those sound amazing. And I've actually been meaning to read Nonviolent Communication. It keeps coming up. So thank you.
They're great. And the other thing is that lead with vulnerability, which we're often trying to avoid feeling vulnerable. On an intimate relationship, that means you need to lean into the vulnerability. You start with the vulnerability. So instead of, this isn't working for me, it's, I'm feeling scared because I'm not sure what's going on right now, or I'm really yearning for this thing and I'm not sure if you want it. So that we're willing to drop into ourselves and feel the vulnerability and bring that to our partner.
Yeah, and when you say lead with vulnerability, that seems simple enough when you just frame it that way. But what are we doing wrong when we're not leading with vulnerability? Like, what are some of the most damaging patterns of communication that most couples seem to have?
Being emotionally reactive, so that we blame or we go into judgment, and that immediately is going to shut our partner down. So that's a big place to really watch for. And the places that we're also closed off and we're not really listening to our partner. So the places where we lead with judgment or frustration or you should be doing this differently. And the places that we're also not opening to what our partner's saying. We're not actually listening to them. So those are two big things that we do. And the other thing is waiting too long to have the communication. So putting off the communication, thinking, well, I'll just wait till it's like the perfect time, or till I don't feel vulnerable about it, or until they're in a really, really good space, or maybe it'll change. And so instead of, when we're not as reactive, having the communication, we wait and wait and wait. And then usually what happens is we then blow up because we're thinking our partner should have read our mind by now, or that they should have changed their behavior by now, but we haven't given them any information. We haven't brought it to their attention. So that place of wait, blow up is very damaging in relationships.
Right. It's not always that simple, though, because I can see myself doing that sometimes. I mean, it's something that I'm always working on, but I'm always trying to grow. So I'm always trying to get into a mindset of being aware of what I'm doing and how I can better show up to the situation. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I find myself trying to transcend a problem. And I say to myself, well, this shouldn't even bother me. So I kind of just put it away. But that's not honoring my needs. So instead of thinking that my needs aren't worthy or they aren't valuable, I just need to figure out a way to frame them, to identify what the actual need is and take away whatever the surface level thing that is bubbling up. Like, you're probably not upset that the dishes aren't done, but that your time and your effort isn't valued and your partner isn't matching your effort. Or you're probably not upset that your partner didn't text you that he was coming home later, but that you didn't feel your time was valued, or it was triggering a wound from a past relationship. So it's usually one surface level deeper than you think it is. So I think just finding whatever way works for you to actually step out of that emotion and see it more objectively is just really helpful.
Exactly.
One of the ways that I've been able to kind of disidentify is by referring to my human. So it kind of separates my emotional state from who I feel like I am. So I know that if I'm immediately triggered, my human is going to have her angry glasses on. So go take a deep breath until those glasses come off and I can come back as more of my authentic self. So that's been pretty helpful for me.
Teaching them to talk about themselves in the third person. I would say HeatherAsh is feeling da-da-da-da. And it's so helpful. It's that same thing. My human, that we're taking a step back and being able to look at how can I do this differently rather than there's one way to react.
Well, coming to our seventh and final secret, this one's about letting go of either knowing whether to let go of a relationship or letting go of the relationship in its current form. So how do you know when it's time to let go?
It's about really listening deeply and also, I believe, practicing letting go throughout your relationship. We want to get away from this thought of you're either in a relationship or you're ending a relationship. Because the truth is, in all relationships, all the time, there's letting go. There's a letting go of who you think you're supposed to be. There's different phases. So if you're retiring, maybe there's a letting go of the amount of income you had. To practice letting go as a part of the relationship gets you familiar that rhythm, that's always going to be part of the relationship. And that also then helps you to be more spacious if you realize that you have gone very separate ways and that you're not serving each other and that it's time to shift the relationship. So that recognition, relationships are shifting all the time, constantly. And, people often ask me that same question, how do I know if it's actually over? And the answer comes, how I've worked with that myself in relationships, is when things start getting rocky, I'll say to myself, okay, what am I committed to? And then I'm committed to working on this relationship, but I'm also committed to not using this relationship against myself or being in a situation that's not going to serve either of us. And so there's that opening to deep, deep listening for what's best, for what's going to be in service, for where we are now. And so nobody from the outside can say, you should end the relationship or you should stay in. It's really your decision from a deep listening place of where you are, what your needs are, and what you're exploring in your life at this time.
It's interesting because I had a friend for a long time who would just end up in these kind of toxic relationships. And I remember just saying to her, well, you've created a negative dynamic, and that's now the only way you two know how to interact with each other. And it was just so unhealthy. But I do know how much easier that it can feel to be passive aggressive sometimes, because explicitly stating your needs, first of all, requires awareness of those needs and also a little bit of courage. So say that you realize you are in a negative or a toxic cycle. What do you do to first try to evolve it? Or is it even possible to evolve that negative dynamic that you've created?
It's definitely possible if both people are willing to become aware, to start looking at what their part is in it, what's unresolved, and to bring things to the table. So if one person is completely unwilling, it's going to make it really difficult. Miguel used to say this when couples come to him wanting counseling around relationship. He always asks one question, which is, do both of you want to stay together? And you have to be really honest. So if both people say yes, okay, you can work it through. It may not be easy, but it's possible. But if one person says no, that means it's over.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Both people have to be willing.
Yeah, because you have to be willing to put in the work.
Yes.
Yeah, some people might be going to counseling because they're thinking, yeah, well, I'll stay with him if he changes completely. Like, I don't want to be with this person, but the person I have in my mind that I think he could be, maybe. So we'll just see what counseling can do.
Yes, exactly. And you have to accept where the other person is. And are you willing to work with where each of you are and have spaciousness with each other as you work things through? But if you fundamentally think someone's going to end up different and then the relationship will work, that's an illusion.
It's so great because changing a relationship dynamic is really the same process as changing a habit. And so we might think, oh yeah, well, I have to change this relationship, and oh my gosh, it's all this hard work, and can we make it? And yes, it's really difficult at first to build that new level or change a way you've been interacting for years. But it's just like with learning anything else. It's difficult at first, but then you start to strengthen those neural connections with the new healthy way. So soon that will be your default way of communicating. Your default way will be coming together and setting boundaries and communicating and voicing your needs and your desires. So it might be a challenge, but it's not that big of a feat as we sometimes make it out to be. And the work, I think, is totally worth it.
Yes. And if you have the willingness and you have the creativity and you're willing to communicate, like you said, what you're learning is you're learning each other's language. You're learning how to respect each other, and you're learning how to communicate and do so in a creative way. And the other person's issues aren't going to magically go away, and your issues aren't going to magically go away, but you learn to navigate with each other and to recognize, oh, okay, they've just been triggered. They need this. Or to communicate, hey, sweetie, what do you need now? So that there's that dialogue going back and forth. And as you said, it then becomes you have a rhythm with each other, you have a respect for each other, and you know how to step in or to step out as needed, because we need those things at different times.
So I love leaving listeners with an action item. So I'm wondering if you have something for those of us that are in a relationship that we can do after this episode to kind of breathe new life into our relationships.
Yeah, 2 tips come to mind. So I'd say one is to have a play date. So to do something unusual and that's enjoyable for both of you. So this is not like my partner likes doing this, so I'm just going to force myself to go do it. It's what can we do together that is maybe outside of what we would normally do that we would both enjoy. So that would be a fun thing. And then the other thing is to have a vulnerable conversation. So to sit down and to share, ask your partner if they're willing to have a conversation and that you want to explore where you're each feeling vulnerable. So that's a really powerful thing in a relationship to say, I'm feeling vulnerable right now in my life about this, or I'm feeling vulnerable about our relationship in this. And one person listens and one person shares. You don't try and fix each other. You're just listening to where each of you is at. And then you switch. Other person listens, other person shares. And then that opens up conversation. How can you best support each other? Again, not fixing each other, just listening, having compassion, being present. And that'll deepen your understanding and your intimacy.
Well, thank you so much for everything that you shared. I know we covered a lot of bases in this interview, and I'm just so honored to have spent this time with you. So for listeners who are resonating with you and want to learn more about your courses and your books, where is the best place to connect with you online?
Is on my website, HeatherAshAmara.com. I also have an author Facebook page. It's a good place as well.
Well, I hope you guys got as much out of that as I did. This week's episode, combined with last week's episode, have just been really powerful. I know for a lot of people, as I said before, a lot of you guys reached out, and last week's episode struck a chord. So hopefully this week will do the same. I personally have already sensed some shifts in my own relationship, just in the way I view conflict, or I view my own reactions to something I'm uncomfortable with. So try out the techniques and let me know how it goes for you. Connect with me on social at MindLoveMelissa. And since it's still the first month of 2019, the first month of the new year, I wanted to do a little check-in and see how you guys are doing with your New Year's resolutions. Did you make any resolutions, set any goals, make any changes? I did, and I did this in a specific way. So I chose a word for 2019, and the word that I want to represent this year is expansion. So expansion in mind, body, and spirit, and business, actually. But what I want to call into this year is structure and discipline, and I've been doing really good. I'm pretty proud of myself. I've been intermittent fasting for almost a month. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. I do eat every day, but only between noon and 8. I've also had no alcohol since 2018. And yes, I know we're only 2 weeks in, but I love my wine. So this is good for me. And then I picked 3 main goals. I wanted to launch my first course, which I already did somehow. I want to do my first keynote speech, which I'm currently writing. And I want to hold my first transformational event, which will be later this year, but I haven't started to plan that yet. And as for the course, I wanted to do a quick shout out to the students in the course. I am so grateful for all of you guys. The course just launched. This is the first week that it's going, and over 70 people signed up, and the group is just amazing to me. They are connecting. They're already reporting transformations. There's so many people committed to making themselves a daily practice. So I love all you guys in the group, and I just feel really good about this year so far. We mentioned a lot of books today, and I'll link to all of those in the show notes at mindlove.com/060. You can support the show by supporting our sponsors, and I do only partner with brands that I really do love and fully believe in. If you're enjoying Mind Love, tell a friend, family member, or coworker about it, and don't forget to subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Also, for some extra inspiration between episodes, don't forget to sign up for the Morning Mind Love at mindlove.com or text morning to 444-999. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.